Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. As you no doubt may be aware, we've encountered a small problem with our engines. That's how it starts when a pilot spins a white lie to keep the calm. But the small problem Captain Malcolm Waters was referring to wasn't minor at all. One of his engines had completely failed, and the other was stuck on full power, dangerously uncontrollable. On board Cathay Pacific Flight 780, 309 passengers and 13 crew members were about to experience a nightmare. The situation was dire. If things didn't improve, they could crash into the South China Sea. The only thing standing between them and disaster, two Australian pilots, Malcolm Waters and David Hayhoe, who had never trained for anything like this. With each passing minute, their plane was deteriorating fast. Could they make it to Hong Kong before everything went horribly wrong? This is the story of Cathay Pacific Flight 780, a flight that became a test of skill, nerves, and the will to survive. It was April 13, 2010, when Flight 780, an Airbus A330, was preparing for takeoff at Wanda International Airport in Surabaya, Indonesia. A routine 5-hour flight to Hong Kong was all that lay ahead. There were 309 passengers, all unaware that a dangerous challenge awaited them in the sky, and 13 crew members led by Captain Malcolm Waters, 35, and First Officer David Hayhoe, 37, had no idea their training would be put to the ultimate test. Malcolm Waters had been with Cathay Pacific for 12 years, racking up more than 7,000 flying hours. David Hayhoe, with over 4,000 hours, had previously flown for the Australian Air Force. The two were a solid team, experienced and ready for a routine flight. The aircraft, an 11-year-old Airbus A330-300, was part of Cathay's fleet. It was one of over 1,000 in service around the world. The sky was clear, the weather perfect. Everything seemed normal. But as the plane took off at 8:24 a.m., everything was about to change. Less than an hour into the flight, something started going wrong. During the climb, the pilots noticed odd fluctuations in the engine readings. The right engine, known as Engine 2, was malfunctioning, struggling to maintain thrust. Soon, they received an alert, Engine 2 CTL system fault, with a warning that the engine would be slow to respond to changes in throttle. The pilots tried to troubleshoot, but the warning wouldn't go away. A few moments later, the issue spread to the left engine, Engine 1, with the same slow response warning. The tension grew. Still, they pressed on, maintaining communication with Cathay Pacific's Operations Center. The engineers advised them to continue monitoring the engines and assured them that the problem could wait until they reached Hong Kong. But the warnings kept coming, and as the hours ticked by, the aircraft's condition deteriorated further. What had seemed like a minor problem was spiraling into something far worse. By 1:20 p.m., the plane was 110 nautical miles from Hong Kong, beginning its descent. That's when disaster struck. The captain heard a pop sound, followed by a burning smell. The cockpit lights flickered. The next ECAM warning flashed on the screen: Engine 1 control system fault, and engine to stall. An engine stall is a serious issue, and the crew knew it. They followed procedure, reducing power on Engine 2 to the lowest setting possible. But the situation was far from stable. The second engine had stalled. The first one wasn't responding properly either. Now, they were down to one engine that was barely working and another that was completely dead. Without enough thrust, they were in danger of losing altitude and crashing into the sea. In a calm but urgent voice, Captain Waters declared a pan over the radio an emergency, but not the full mayday. They weren't at the final point of no return yet, but it was getting close. The pilots quickly briefed for a one-engine approach, a maneuver designed for situations exactly like this, where one engine is out. But as they descended, the situation became critical. At 1:30 p.m., just 50 miles from the airport, Engine 1 stalled. Now, both engines were useless. They were flying on fumes. In a split-second decision, First Officer Hayhoe made the call. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Cathay 780 has Engine 1 and Engine 2 stall. We require a lower descent, maintaining 8,000 feet. The plane, now essentially a glider, was losing speed rapidly. The pilots had no choice but to keep the plane in a glide, hoping for a miracle. The next few moments felt like an eternity as they desperately tried to keep the aircraft in the air. If they couldn't restart at least one engine, they'd have no chance of landing. And then, just as they approached the airport, the flight got even more dangerous. They were still in the clouds, and their speed was dangerously low. They couldn't let the plane stall. In a frantic attempt to control the speed, Captain Waters pulled back on the throttle, but Engine 1 stayed stubbornly stuck at a high thrust setting. Now, with the aircraft racing towards the runway too fast and one engine still unresponsive, the crew's training kicked in. They had to land as quickly as possible without overrunning the runway into the sea. With the plane moving at 230 knots, almost twice the normal final approach speed, Captain Waters executed the final approach. They had no choice but to land fast and pray they wouldn't overshoot. At 1:45 p.m., the Airbus hit the runway hard. The plane bounced, then slammed back down, scraping the left engine along the tarmac. The brakes screamed, glowing red hot. The speed brakes deployed, but only one engine's thrust reverser worked. The plane skidded along the runway of control, rapidly running out of space. Finally, after a nerve-wracking 2.5-kilometer slide, the aircraft came to a stop just 309 meters from the runway's edge. It was time to evacuate. There were some minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening. It was a miracle. This was a textbook case of what happens when a crew stays calm under pressure. Captain Waters and First Officer Hayhoe were awarded the prestigious Polaris Award by the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations for their incredible skill and bravery. The source of contamination? Salt water, which had somehow made its way into the fuel during refueling. Thanks to this incident, major improvements were made in fueling procedures at Surabaya Airport. Airbus also added new procedures to their pilot handbooks to help future crews handle similar emergencies. Flight 780 is a story of survival against the odds, a story of teamwork, of determination, and of staying cool when everything goes wrong. It's a reminder of the men and women in the cockpit who sometimes have to fly by instinct and skill when there's no manual for what's happening. For everyone on that flight, the journey ended safely. But for Captain Waters, First Officer Hayhoe, and everyone aboard, it was a flight they would never forget.